Kia ora whanau. Welcome to our next online Māori language lesson, Te Reo Māori, here with Brooklands Church. And let's begin then with our karakia and waiata. So, ki runga, ki raro, ki roto, ki waho. I nā te mahi, he tino rangatira. And for our waiata today, I'm just going to give you a new waiata. It's one that's sung a lot in, not just in church situations, but also school and marae and pōwhiri. It has a special connection to taranaki, so you often hear it sung around here. E honore, e koloria, maumaro. Kia ora. So again today, just to make sure I end up in the right place on the whiteboard, I've put the writing on the whiteboard first, in Māori writing, and firstly just wanted to go over some stuff from last time. So the first thing last time was I believe I may have put tōna, tāna, his, her, and then tāna just with his. So these are just alternatives, so they both just mean his or her, and tāna also means his or her. So those are the ones then when you're making a difference between tōna and tāna, depending on what belongs to him or her, and this one you're not making that difference. And we also gave you the example of the sentence with asking your question, and gave you these two different formats. And one thing I didn't mention is that you could be asked the question this way, but you might answer it this way. You don't have to reply in the same way the person is talking to you. And so which way, whether you use this system of changing between tōku or tāku, or this system where you're not changing, you're just taku, then it's just the preference of the speaker. It may also be linked with just what they do more in their area, in their rohe or in their iwi, or just what they're used to saying. So they're interchangeable. So I want to talk a little bit more about how you know what sort of things are or and what sort of things are. So I talked to you last time about the way that things that you receive, that you're dependent on, things that are to you are all, but things that just come from you or you do, then what are. So the sort of things that are all to you would be your name, because your name is part of who you are. It's your identity, if you like. So tōku ingoa. Also iwi, which is your people. Or tribe, I guess, also, if you want to think of that, just narrow that down a little bit. So, tōku iwi, that's the group that I'm from or part of. And I guess also, it's something that you're part of. You know, then that's, you depend on the rest of it. Your father, of course, or parent, tōku matua, matua's father. Or in fact, any male who's a generation above you, so it's a word you might use for your uncle, or any respected male figure older than you, matua. and therefore used as a name to address a male teacher at a school. Not so. Hoa tōku hoa. This is an interesting one because this is a person who's a friend or a peer or just someone who's an associate of yours. So, hoa, you might think, well, I pick and choose my friends, but in terms of, I guess, going back to a tribal society, your peers are simply the people who are the same age group as you and your friends. So they are simply, you just have them, they're there. So that's an interesting one, tōku hoa. And in a sense, you depend on those friends, those peers, to back you up, to be part of your team. Tōku tipuna is an obvious one because tipuna means ancestor. And that can be as many generations back, of course, as you want. Here's another important one, tōku whenua. Whenua is land. And so because I'm connected with the land, or because that's the land that I belong with, or that I'm attached to, then that whenua is tōku whenua. It's not just something that I just have control over, or dispose as I please. Tōku whenua, my land, the land I belong to. Which, of course, it makes life very challenging if you then become separated from that land. So the last one here is manawa is your heart. So again, this is like a part of you is just part of you. So it's just part of who you are. So tōku manawa. So I'll put some words in there because some of those are new. Name we've had before. This is my people. This is my father is the basic meaning of that word. Friend, I think we've had before. Tipuna is ancestor. Whenua, land. Manawa, heart. So some examples now of things that, or people that to you are. So we had this last time that someone below you in a generation, tāku tamaiti. Tamaiti is a child of yours. Tāku mokopuna is another good example because again that's like a grandchild or great-grandchild, so a descendant of yours in your whānau. This is literally something you do, this is a deed or an action, so this is something that I cause. So tāku mahi. And this is an example of a possession. So any sort of possession that you just have at your disposal and you use, you can do with as you please, come into this a category. And tāku pene, and a pene is indeed a pen. And here's one that some of you might know, kuri, which is a dog. So again, it's an animal that you own and that you have control over, I guess, so it belongs to you. So tāku kuri. So some extra words there. So we had child the other week. We would, I guess, in Pākehā say grandchild. This is my work, my action. It's the pen, and it's a dog. And so this is just a reminder that with any of those, instead of worrying about tōku, tāku, or you're just not sure, or just don't have to think through that while you're saying it, you can use taku with any of these words. Taku ingoa, taku iwi, taku tīmpuna, taku mahi, taku kuri, taku tamaiti, any of those, taku whenua, all those you can use taku with. So that goes with anything. And just to give you an example of how these two different systems, you might find them in different contexts. So that song I sang at the start today, the last line I used was tōku oranga. So there's tōku oranga, and oranga, we've had ora meaning healthy or alive. So oranga is your health or well-being. which is, in other words, a source of life for you. So that's something you are dependent on or is part of you. So in that song, it's tōku oranga, so it uses that form. But in the end, in the Anglican prayer book, at the end of the Confession of Faith, it describes God as taku oranga ngākau. So taku oranga, because it's using that other style words, changing that around. So it's just an example where two different ways that I would come across those words in that context. And I just follow the words that happen in that context. Okay, so it's still a little bit grammatical, these lessons, but helpful to explain this step by step. So, we've come across before the idea that in Māori you don't really have this idea of just putting the S on the end of a word to make it plural. So we've had the idea that ngā is like a plural form of saying ngā. So te hoa, the friends. And so if you want to say the friends, ngā, is so you just change the te for ngā. So it's the change of this word, the word for the, instead of putting a different ending on the word hoa. So hoa stays exactly the same, but the ngā makes it the friends. And there are other languages, even European languages, that have different words for the, depending on the singular or plural. In fact, English is a little bit unusual among some of those European languages that this word doesn't change the. But again, often those European languages will change the endings. Māori does not. And that's in common with a lot of other Polynesian, Pacific, and even Asian languages. So here's another example, te matua, father, or parent. It's just father. But if I have the fathers, or whole group of people, or even can also mean the parents, then I put ngā in front of it. But this is an example, and they often come in family relationships, where in fact you do change it. And we may have mentioned this before. And the way we change it is by lengthening that sound. So te matua, the father. Ngā mātua, the fathers or the parents. So that means that the pronunciation of this word is actually quite important. When you address a teacher or someone as a matua, if you say mātua, sort of getting that word a bit wrong, the person would no doubt still understand it because they know that you couldn't be talking about parents if you were just talking to, more than one if you're just talking to them. But mātua is this plural word for fathers or parents, and matua is the just one. One word that you do hear a lot. Sorry, go back to this matua. We also had this already when we were talking about the national anthem, E Hoa Atua, and we talked about the fact that Te Atua is the God, or if you're addressing God, isn't the only one. But in plural, this is, and you can see the connection here between atua and matua. So, ngā atua are the gods. So, and of course, if you're talking about Māori cosmology and rongo and tāne and all that, and tangaroa and all those haumea, you're talking about ātua, the gods. So it's another example of that, changing that lengthening that sound to make it plural. One that you would be very familiar with, I'm sure from news and just general conversation, people are always using this word down here that I haven't written here. So tamaiti is child, the child, and the plural that you've probably heard quite a lot is tamariki. So that's another example. Again, it's to do with people and family relationships where you have actually a different word for the plural. So tamaiti and ngā tamariki. Okay, so just summarising, picking up on one or two of those things we said last week. Those are both his heard. I haven't really used them yet in any of our conversation. A reminder here that when you're using those two different forms, you can alternate and change between them just according to your preference. So there's no problem. When we get to those categories of or and are, just things that are inherently part of us or that we receive from others, or even that are our equal or our peers or people of the same generation or on a par with us, or and but people who are descended from us, or things that we do, and I come to this category of of things that we have control over. And say control, that we are sort of responsible for bringing into being. There's a better way of describing it. And so just giving that example that you might use taku for any of these. And so tōku oranga is very much something that comes into here. My health, I'm dependent on my health, it's part of who I am. And that in the song we sang before, there it was tōku oranga, but in another part of the prayer book that you come across taku oranga, and it's not tāku oranga, it's taku oranga. And then we looked at the plurals and how we've already had te and ngā for the and the singular, the plural, and now we come across tōku and ōku. So we just dropped the T for our plural here, so instead of tōku it's ōku, instead of tāku it's āku. And we're going to see that pattern continue with other words too, but just starting with that. But in that plural, I forgot to put in the words. So this is my friend, and this is my very messy friends. Tāku pene, my pen, and just dropping that T at the start, āku pene, my pens. And so if I use taku, I can use that with pene or hoa, whatever relation that is to me. So taku is my, just one thing, aku, my plural things. So it's a good example of the all category, the are category. That's the singular tōku hoa, and the plural ōku hoa. So that's parallel there with te hoa and ngā hoa. The friend, the friends, my friend, my friends, without that. And although mostly you come across these nouns that don't change at the end, occasionally, especially in family sort of relationships, you will get a change of the vowel sound or a different ending to make it plural, but they're very much the exception. So matua, matua, atua, atua, tamaiti, tamariki. Okay, we'll finish with our waiata again today, and we'll just do that sound at the start, and so you will hear the tōku oranga at the end. Aka koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa ki a kaha te reo Māori.